Okay, so I think we're good to go. Scott, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Sorry.
No problem.
I had a brief technical error.
It's okay.
Let's get it out of the way at the beginning. What's going to happen?
Okay, so I think we're good to go. Scott, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I'm ready to go.
The sound seems to be a bit off for me, at least.
Yes, I can. Sorry.
No problem.
I had a brief technical error.
It's okay.
Let's get it out of the way at the beginning. What's going to happen?
Okay, so I think we're good to go.
I'm having a delay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's the same for me, but I'm hoping it's okay now.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we can start, and I'm gonna start by saying hello to everyone. Welcome to another Media Toolkit webinar, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Eva, and I'm the product marketing specialist at Media Toolkit, and I will also be guiding you through today's session. So while we wait for everyone to gather, I'll briefly talk about Media Toolkit and then hand it off to Scott, who is the star of the show. So if any of you are not familiar with Media Toolkit yet, it is an award-winning media monitoring tool and analytics tool. PR and marketing professionals across the globe use Media Toolkit for its ability to track more than 100 million online sources in real time. We also have an extremely user-friendly interface and advanced query setup. It takes less than 3 minutes to start monitoring your brand. So if you're interested, you can learn more about us on mediatoolkit.com and sign up for a free trial. Now, as you'll probably know, today's session will be held by Scott Baradel. Scott is the CEO of IdeaGrow, author of the upcoming book Trust Signals, the New PR, and he also has an accreditation in public relations from the Public Relations Society of America. So thank you, everyone. And Scott, you can take it from here.
Thank you, Eva. I really appreciate the opportunity. I met Eva through Quora, and so it shows you the kind of connections that you make for business on social, and it's been a great relationship, and I've gotten to know Media Toolkit as well. In PR, you really like to know who your audience is, so I'm going to start with a little quick poll that I'm going to launch. Hopefully it will work, and this should just take you 30 seconds to answer these questions, and it's going to let me know what kind of job you have, agency, brand, where you're located, since this is global, and also what size organization you work for. So the answers are coming in. We've got almost everyone responding, about 80%. I'm going to give you a few more seconds. Okay, we're at 90%. That's close enough. So it looks like about 2/3 are actually agency folks, majority in the US, and about 2/3 also are with companies under 50 people. So those are the results that hopefully you can all see. So that helps me understand the audience that we're talking to, and I can cater it a little bit better. So thanks for that. So okay. Don't get canceled. Managing your reputation in a post-truth world is the presentation. Just quickly about me and IdeaGrow. IdeaGrow is based in Dallas, Texas. We are a B2B tech PR and marketing firm. We are proud of the work we do and the workplace we've created. We're a trust generation firm. And by that, I mean, if you know telecom or logistics, you might have heard of last mile services. That's lead generation. What we do comes before that. That's the trust generation, seeding that ground so that you are able to build strong relationships between your brand or your client's brands and their customers. And without trust, nothing else matters. There are no sales that happen. There are no leads that happen that are successful if you haven't first built trust. And so we're integrated, but all the things we do, from web design to media relations to content, are all focused on this central goal of securing trust at scale for our clients. So I'll give you the key takeaways up front. I will tell you not only what we're going to talk about, but what the takeaway is, so you can think about that. We're going to start by looking at how reputation management has changed. It's changed a lot in the last 5 years, probably more in the last 5 years than it's changed in the last 50 years. And it's been around a long time, but it's becoming more challenging. Second, we're going to be talking about how you put a reputation management program in place. And that means the best defense is a good offense. So doing some things proactively so that you're ready. Third, we're going to be talking about empathy and how, in the case of brands, marketers are used to thinking about the customer and empathizing with the customer's needs and pain points and having a product or service to solve that. But you've really got to think about other needs and concerns of the customer and other audiences beyond the customer when you're thinking about reputation management. And finally, just going into kind of the nuts and bolts, the day-to-day of a reputation management program. So let's start by a look at the playing field in reputation management, which is really in many ways become a minefield. There's three big reasons why reputation management has become so much more difficult. The first is that the public expects more from brands. It used to be that you sold a product and the product worked and customers were happy and you went on your merry way. But increasingly, the public expects brands to represent more than a product. They want them to represent an idea. They want them to be in some way making the world a better place, taking a stand on social issues, aligning their product with some larger goal. They want to patronize businesses and work with companies that have a goal beyond making money. And this is something that hasn't always been the case. In fact, until fairly recently, it was pretty common guidance for PR firms to tell brands to kind of just stay out of it. But you can get in trouble now for staying on the sidelines. And there are a number of examples where brands have been punished for an unwillingness to stand up for what their customers and other audiences believed was right. Second, the consequences for making a mistake or for inaction are far more immediate and far more severe than they've ever been. We all know the examples of cancellations or being held accountable, however you want to frame it. The bottom line is these things can emerge on social media, can catch fire, and everything can be consumed, including your business, if you haven't been prepared for it and handled it properly. Third, you're dealing with a public that's much more complex than in the past. It used to be there were considered to be shared sources of truth or even objective truth from different gatekeeping sources. And if you could get those sources to buy your side of an issue, you were good. Well, that's no longer the case. You know, for one member of your audience, New York Times might be the Bible, but for another, they might be the devil, and they don't believe a word in it. So you have to really figure out your audience well enough to understand what stories to tell, what issues to align with, and how to reach the specific audiences that are most important to you in your business. I'm sorry, I'm having issues with this, but you're getting a sneak peek along the way. So let's talk about that first point, which is the idea that more is expected from brands. And this is particularly true of millennials and younger. What's happened is in surveys that are very well done and respected, like Edelman's Trust Barometer, affirm that increasingly consumers will buy products specifically because of the brand's stance on issues, or that the brand's values align with the customer, as opposed to the features and benefits of the product. And so this is what consumers increasingly are looking for. And as you go younger and younger in studies, the younger the consumer, the more that's the case. So we can only expect that to continue, because it's not just a factor of age, because this didn't used to be the case with younger consumers. So we've got to think of this in terms of being a long-term trend. What that means is companies really have to think seriously about embracing purpose as a way to unify your audiences and give your brand an edge over those who appear to only care about the bottom line.
Scott?
Yeah.
Sorry, there is a raised hand in the audience.
Oh, let me get that. Sorry, I haven't done one of these before with Zoom. All right. Okay, I apologize. Eva, how should I handle the raised hand? I don't see a question.
Jeremiah raised his hand and he can talk now. So Jeremiah, okay, if you're still here. Nope. Okay. I guess we can move on and go through all of these potential questions after the presentation.
Well, I would say I do have my chat pane open. So I'm sorry I didn't do the hand raising thing, but I do have my chat pane open. So feel free to leave questions along the way. And okay, Jeremiah just left a message that he's having network issues and is going to drop his question in the chat. So along the way, I know when there is a brief Q&A at the end, but I know for me, if I have a question during a presentation, half the time I forget about it by the time the Q&A comes around. So don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Was that Jeremiah coming on? I'm hearing something that sounds like it could be a clown car or it could be Jeremiah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but we can handle those
okay.
After.
Okay, so getting canceled. So hopefully your brand or my brand won't get canceled for having technical difficulties in a Zoom webinar, but what I wanted to talk about is that it is happening more and more. It's one of those things that when something, a rumor or happens online or the wrong thing is said, a number of things can start an effort on social media to cancel a person or brand or to hold them accountable for their actions. Often in the case of an individual, it's an effort to get the person fired. In the case of a brand, some businesses have gone out of business. And this is not about whether or not the consequences are too severe, whether it's deserved. Apart from that, the point is that it happens. The point is that it happens rapidly. And the point is that you have to be prepared for it and you have to know what to do should something like this happen. Because I'll give you an example later where it can happen with brands that have absolutely done nothing wrong just because of a misunderstanding. I'll give one example of a cancellation that happened here in Dallas. Stan Richards, he has been the CEO for over 40 years of one of the largest independent advertising firms in the United States. He was having an internal meeting with the internal team working on the Motel 6 hospitality chain's account. He said when he saw a proposed ad campaign that it was too black. This was passed on to the client. The client immediately fired Richards Group. Many other clients followed. There were, for a time, I think there was the belief that the Richards Group would simply go from being one of the biggest advertising firms in the country to going out of business. Within a couple of days, however, Stan Richards resigned his position, and they've taken a lot of remedial steps and a lot of steps to show that they are indeed committed to DEI, diversity, and to kind of learning from the mistake that was made. They've tried to take a lot of steps. They seem to be on a path to recovery now, but obviously this was something that happened very quickly. And, you could argue if Richards Group had some of these DEI measures and other things that we're doing and other things in place before a remark like this was made, perhaps the remarks would have been put in a different context. Might have still cost Stan Richards his job, but perhaps would not have been viewed as a statement about the Richards Group as a whole. So finally, the third point, we've talked about how more is expected from brands and how that ties to social purpose, how consequences can be immediate and severe, and that's how we talk about cancel culture. And let's talk about what we mean by a post-truth world. Really what we're talking about is that, without the shared sources of truth, media gatekeepers, civic institutions that the general public, as a broad swath of the public, believes in, brands have to really carefully sift through all the sources of information that are influencing their audiences and figure out which ones are going to be most important to their customers and other audiences. I speak specifically based on experience in the United States, and I recognize all of these trends, may be different in other countries, but I know a lot of them at some level have extended beyond the United States into Europe and other parts of the world. But to stick with the United States for a moment, I'll give the example of Donald Trump, because obviously people have very strong opinions about Donald Trump. The point, though, is how different points of views are based on different sets of facts or sources of information. So in the case of mainstream media sources, they have for 5 years been counting mistruths, attributing lies to Donald Trump, thousands in the case of the Washington Post and other sources. Many people in the United States consider Donald Trump to have been the most dishonest, untrustworthy president the United States has ever had. However, there's also a significant segment of the US public that not only still supports Donald Trump, but in surveys has said that they consider him the first president in their lifetime who, quote unquote, tells it like it is. They consider him to be the most honest president of their lifetime. So they're looking beyond the way the mainstream media is talking about truth versus lies and redefining it in another way that for them leads to the complete opposite conclusion. This has never been the case before in the United States. If Nixon went out of office or Jimmy Carter, other presidents, generally there was a pretty broad consensus as to whether that person was successful or failed, and judgment about that person's character and so forth. Just not the case today. So we talk about reputation management. Excuse me, when we're talking about reputation management, we're talking about something that has been around a long time. At the turn of the 20th century is where it really came into its own in the United States. You had railroads and railroad monopolies at that time that were getting very bad media coverage. What were called as the muckraking journalists wanted to basically break up the train companies. The coverage was universally negative. The train companies weren't doing anything to help themselves though, because they basically, if there were things like a fatal crash, they would not only not allow the media to come to the crash site or things like that, they would deny the crash occurred altogether. And that's where you had this breakdown in that relationship. So a guy named Ivy Lee, who's generally considered the father of PR in the United States, came along, was hired by the railroad company, and basically said, you know what, it's actually going to work out better for you if you admit your mistakes and admit that crashes happen. And so the next time there was a fatal crash, Ivy Lee shepherded journalists to the crash site. They had executives from the company there to answer questions. They'd follow up to find out information they didn't know. This was all very new. And that's really kind of reputation management, in a sense, is where the whole practice of PR started. Many brands and brands we work with a lot of younger companies, mid-sized companies that they just want to focus on grow, get me media coverage. But you're basically going wherever you're going in a leaky boat if you're not thinking about the risk to your reputation and the risk to trust if you're not taking care of that part of the PR equation. Crisis communications, some people wonder about the difference between the two. That's just that kind of salient moment, that moment of truth for your brand, where you really have to be doing reputation management all the time, but be ready for those key moments. Personally in my career, telecom outages that have affected millions of my employer's customers, workplace shootings, and having to be on site at those, salacious lawsuits. I've dealt with all of these things. And the analogy that I would give, I actually on the slide, I have a baseball analogy, but since there's folks that probably, since they're in Europe, don't really know much about baseball, basketball. Eva is from a place that is very good at basketball. In basketball, you have players that earn a reputation by being very good at scoring, rebounding, passing, and so forth. They're very good players. But it's that how they performed at the last second shot in game 7 to win a championship or lose a championship has very much a disproportionate impact on, over the long term, how that player is viewed. Oh yeah, he puts up good stats in the regular season, but look what happened, in the championship. He missed that shot. That's kind of like what crisis communications is like. It's those moments that are going to be remembered over time, how you handled those moments. So you really need to be prepared for them and understand that they could happen to anyone. So let's talk about laying a program foundation. A big difference between reputation management when Ivy Lee was doing it and reputation management today is that we live so much of our lives online. And so much of the crises either emerge initially or are accelerated online. And that's where you really need to establish your key touch points. If you think of it like a three-legged stool for us with our clients, you need to establish relationships and a foothold with the news media that's relevant to you and your audiences, social media, and also company and product review sites. So the news media is, what you don't want to happen is for to get the first call you've ever gotten from a journalist to be when there's a crisis that you're dealing with. You're starting from a negative defensive position. If that journalist is doing a story on you and they look you up and there's no other news coverage, they can't find much information about you, that negative story or that crisis is going to define you in that journalist's eyes and in the public's eyes as well. So if you start now, if you haven't already, with a PR program designed to build relationships with news media. get to know the media sources and journalists that are important to your industry, your space, the topics that are important to you as a business, and begin to seed positive stories and stories that give a broader context about who you are and what you're about. That's going to give, when the crisis happens, that's going to put you in a much better position to get well-rounded coverage. In the same way, you need to establish footholds on social media. Twitter and LinkedIn for most brands, consumer brands, and some B2B brands as well, of course, Facebook, Instagram, etc. What the social media sites are going to vary based on your product and your audience. And so you need to know your audience to know where they are and where they're going to be. But for where they're going to be on social media, you have to be there too. You can't wait till something blows up about you on Twitter to start a Twitter account. It's too late. And so you need to be out there. You need to be engaging with the right people. You know, we have clients that talk about, well, we have this social media account, but we're not getting sales from it. Well, it's generating it's about relationships, and relationships ultimately lead to sales, but you don't go into it with the objective of sales. You go into it with the objective of building relationships and building trust. So company and product review sites, a third kind of leg of this stool. The top 3 review sites, if you look at all businesses, local businesses and so forth, would be Google, Yelp, and Facebook. Google's important to everybody because Google search results, Google reviews come up high in Google search results. If you're a local business, a Google My Business panel will show up and it'll stay right there what your Google star rating is. So those are very important to just about everybody. But if you want to know which review sites are important to you, just Google your brand and see what comes up in the first 2 or 3 pages of search results, and identify the review sites, 3 to 5, that are most important to you, and establish a presence there. Fill out your profile, add your examples of your work. If you've got happy customers who can leave reviews, do that. It's much better to have that in place when a negative review comes in, or when a reputational issue happens. You know, we had examples of where the media has, you know, because media is so strapped in terms of staffing today, where when they're writing a story about a company, one of our clients, and they want a customer quote, rather than even asking us for a customer that they can talk to, they'll just grab a customer review off a review site, like Gartner Peer Insights or another, and put it directly into their story. It's another reason why these are so important to all kinds of companies, from not just local restaurants, but all the way up to kind of multi-million-dollar enterprise software today. So those are kind of the places, the 3 areas where you really kind of need to have a foothold online in order to be ready for reputational issues and to establish a positive reputation. In addition to kind of having these platforms, there's a question of what do you then say on them? Obviously, you can talk about your product. You can, you can post on holidays. You can post thought leadership content about your industry. But increasingly, there's an opportunity to do more. And that's where we get to social purpose, which I talked about earlier. Social purpose is something that will give you, because you're talking about a larger issue beyond just your product, it is something that is much more likely to get engagement on social media, to be covered by the media. It's going to burnish your brand in a way that just having a great product is not. And so there are many benefits to that being a real central point of view for how you approach the news media, social media, and so forth. But you have to ask yourself first, is it right for you? Because it's such a big decision. It's not like a CSR, corporate social responsibility campaign, kind of a feel-good sidelight. It's something that's core to your brand. I'll give you an example of a brand that has a social purpose, and you can think of it in a context like this to think about whether it makes sense for your company. You know, Lego they do it just about better than anyone. There's a company called RepTrack that monitors and does surveys regularly, annually, to determine the most reputable companies in the world. And for the last 2 years has ranked Lego the most reputable company in the world. Lego's involved in a variety of issues like sustainability, online safety for kids, DEI. The common thread is in all of their messaging, they always tie it back to children. They always tie it back to enriching, nurturing, and protecting the future of children. That's how it's elevated from being kind of a one-off charitable endeavor to something larger, where when you are a Lego customer, you feel like you're part of something larger, and you feel like you're sharing values with the corporation. So as I said, it's not for everyone because you can't fake it. You know, you can't fake it because people will figure out that you're faking it, right? If it's something that you're just kind of slapping on your value proposition and let's say this, but it's not core to your culture and how you run your company and what attracts employees to your company, what makes them feel good about their jobs and what they're doing. It has to be from the inside out, and it has to be real. And so when we do branding sessions with our clients, we look at this question as we're looking at questions like the brand essence and the brand personality and so forth. We look at the question of social purpose as well. And in some cases, brands are all on board. In other cases, they feel like they're not quite ready for it yet. But every company, I think, large or small, and whatever industry you're in, should at least be having that conversation. So bottom line is the best defense is a good offense. Get that program in place, and you'll be in a much better position to be judged in a broader context should something negative happen. Third, I just want to talk briefly about empathy, because marketers have empathy. You know, it's you might not think of it that way, but that's ultimately every successful product ever created was the product of empathy. Empathy just means putting yourself in someone else's place. And so every inventor, everyone who's developed a project, every company that has thought about the pain points. You know, what's this customer want? What are they going through? If I were the customer, what would I want to solve a problem? And that's how products are invented and created. But from the buyer persona development process throughout, there's so much focus on the buyer that if you come particularly from a marketing background, it can be easy to not think about other considerations. So reputation management extends beyond the product and extends beyond the customer. You know, marketers focus mostly on customer audiences. PR pros typically interact with investors, employees, partners, communities as well. And all of those audiences need to be factored into a reputation management program. And in addition to the product's features and benefits, you also have to think about, as we stated before, what are the values of the brand and how are they demonstrated in ways other than the product. So we view something we call the trust profile as an analog to a PR analog to marketing's buyer persona. You know, in buyer persona, you have, Mary marketer, and these are the things that drive her buying decision. But you don't get into, and we do buyer research that's qualitative, or we do interviews, we do half-hour interviews with our our clients' customers and wins and losses to get a sense of how they determine their consideration set and make their decisions. That's very different from figuring out what's going to make your key audiences trust or not trust you. I'll give you the example of Colin Kaepernick. You know, I promise you that Nike knew, not from a hunch, but from research, that working with Colin Kaepernick, who's obviously a controversial figure in the United States, quarterback, he's the athlete who originally knelt during the national anthem to protest against racial injustice. It led to a lot of controversy, but Nike knew that hiring Colin Kaepernick as a spokesperson, as the face of an advertising campaign, would not only be the right thing to do for that brand's values, but would help the bottom line because Nike knew its customers. And it did. It was very successful for the bottom line, as well as for underscoring Nike's social purpose. For another brand, let's say a brand in the United States that's serving a very rural customer base that's tends to be very conservative, they wouldn't consider, a Colin Kaepernick as a spokesperson because it would alienate their customer base. And so these are the kinds of questions that, not to say that the CEO can't just say, you know what, I don't care what my customers think, this is what's right, this is what we're going to do. Well, you can always do that, but however you make your decision, it's always good to have information about what the impact of your decisions will be on how much your audiences trust you or don't trust you. So you have to think beyond the customer product dynamic. Finally, just the day-to-day, the nuts and bolts of how you implement a program. The bottom line is things are going to happen. You can do everything right, and you can still get one-star Google reviews, and lawsuits or a negative news story could come out. You want to talk about an innocent bystander, Wayfair, the furniture retailer you may have heard a few months ago, was the subject of this wild conspiracy theory that it came from the world of QAnon, but it blew up all over Instagram, Twitter, and it basically was a conspiracy theory that was suggesting that Wayfair was trafficking children in arm wars, which on its face sounds absolutely ludicrous, but was not treated as ludicrous by the thousands of people sharing this online. Wayfair thought briefly that it could ignore this because on its face it was ludicrous, but then realized they couldn't and realized they had to come out and address it, and they did. But this is the kind of thing that you have to realize can happen, and you can't just let something like that go. You have to address it and address it the right way. So speaking of the right way versus the wrong way, we had Ivy Lee and how the PRSA and the whole idea of ethical PR emerged from Ivy on down. But then when the internet emerged, you started to have from the SEO world this kind of cottage industry of online reputation management. And while there are some very good online reputation management companies, it's kind of gotten a bad reputation. The New York Times just did a really big piece on kind of the dark corners of this kind of online reputation management space. So just as a warning, there are things that some online reputation management companies advocate that we think are a very bad idea, like creating fake reviews to push down negative reviews, buying backlinks, buying mentions in publications. There's a whole underground, there's so many contributors, freelance contributors to publications now. Many today take payments on the side. That's something that occasionally there'll be a big purge of these when they get found out. Same things happened with Wikipedia. There was an agency that some years back that had paid a network of Wikipedia contributors to write entries for companies. And then it was discovered, all of those entries were pulled down, basically would never be able to get a Wikipedia entry again. And the company was, was banned, of course, from Wikipedia. These are the kind of things that can happen if you're doing those kinds of things. You can't erase reality. If you suck in real life, as someone once said, you'll suck on the internet. So the right way to do things is to get to the core of the reputational issues. So first, let's start by not being defensive about why there's a customer complaint or whatever it might be. Let's figure out what you're doing wrong and could be doing better. If your employees are leaving 1-star reviews on Glassdoor, don't get mad at your employees. Figure out why that is. Get to the bottom of it. Try to make it better. And then develop a plan to communicate the changes in your business. That's whether you've made a mistake with your employees, with your customers, or whoever the audience might be. You've got to respond to customer complaints and do so rapidly. You've got to also do things like, because it is true that the unhappy employees, for example, will be more likely to be motivated to leave a review on Glassdoor than a happy one. It's okay, and Glassdoor, for example, encourages you to ask them, and you can ask your customers through NPS surveys. And if they're a promoter of your business, you can ask them to leave a review. And of course, earning positive media coverage to show what you're about or to show that you've overcome any reputational issues that you might have had is another thing you can do. Just to give you a sense that this is, I'm going to try to finish up in about 5 minutes, so we'll have 10 minutes for a question. That you can do quick fixes the right way too, right? Because the bad guys in ORM are promising quick fixes, and that's their big draw. But here's an example. Let's say we have a client that has a lot of bad Glassdoor reviews, and they have a 2. They're a 2, and they have made a lot of improvements, and their newer reviews are good, but they still can't bring up this 2 star rating. Well, you can do things like, if many businesses don't have much of a presence on a Glassdoor competitor called Comparably yet, but you can simply initiate that by recommending that employees that would like to leave a review, leave one there. You start to get a positive reviews that show the change in your business. You can, by linking from your homepage, draw that to your first page of branded search results alongside the Glassdoor reviews. These are things that you can do quickly. You don't have to wait 6 months for your Glassdoor star rating to grow up. Same idea for product review sites. So bottom line is, you have to recognize that we're talking about a 24-hour information cycle where, particularly with customer service complaints, but just in general, online rumors too, people expect responses very quickly, and they expect you to respond. And you have to respond humbly, quickly, and you have to show customers when they do have complaints that are valid, when you've made improvements based on that input. So I call that embracing the perfectly imperfect, because you can have a clockwork system for how you handle these things, but at the root of it has to be the humility of admitting that you make mistakes and that you're not perfect, and owning those mistakes. So again, these are the key takeaways: more difficult climate, preparing in advance, thinking beyond customer product, and embracing the perfectly imperfect in having kind of a day-to-day strategy for managing reputation. And then finally, I just very briefly wanted to talk about the big picture, which is reputation management is kind of part of this larger equation. For Idea Grow, we call it growing with trust. And the trust components for our agency are reputation management, along with third-party validation, the media, customer reviews, all the things out there, people saying good things about you, because people believe what others say about you sooner than they believe what you say about yourself. Having a user experience, like a website experience, that makes people feel at home, they connect with you, having a search presence that shows Google thinks you're legit and authoritative as a source, and having thought leadership that also shows, you're smart and have things to say and have vision, which translates back to them assuming you have a good product or service as well. These are all parts of what the trust equation that I think all PR agencies in particular should be thinking about, bringing all the tools at their disposal to deliver these for their clients. Because without trust, nothing else matters. So that is, well, I did okay there. That it's 11:46. I was trying to do by 11:45, and happy to answer any questions you have. Happy to provide, we'll provide this recording and deck and so forth, whatever you'd like as resources. The question I have is, how do you explain, the question from Andrea Castillo, how do you explain to an old-fashioned, stubborn client the importance of building PR reputation? Have you ever worked with this type of clients? Yes, that's because I'm alive. I'm in PR, so yeah, I think we all have. And they can be a small company, mid-size, big. You can come across that mentality at any kind of company, and it really comes down to many companies have very sales-driven cultures, and many companies, even public companies, are all about quarter-to-quarter sales and generating leads immediately and those kind of things. And then they ask, why didn't these leads turn into sales? Well, you planted your seeds in barren ground. You didn't create soil that was ready for the seeds, and that's what building a reputation and building trust is all about. And so all you can do is walk them through this explanation. I think we can show today, PR increasingly can show a lot of data around things like branded searches. If your client is not doing advertising, and you're the main way that they're getting visibility to their brand, and over time, branded searches for that company are increasing, that's the direct result of your efforts in PR. And so increasingly, that's just one of many examples you can show to show why PR reputation is not, a waste of time. Are there other questions?
I have another question. Oh, here it is. Can you see the Q&A?
I see it, but it's not opening for me. Hold on.
I can read it. So the
Hey,
question.
go ahead and read it. I don't know why it's not opening, but I see the little one there, but it's not opening.
Yeah. So what do you think of taking legal action against those who initiate defamation campaigns against companies of their members?
Against companies what?
Against companies or their members, sorry.
Okay. It's tricky. We've dealt with, we had a CEO who had a lawsuit that had been filed against him, and it was the allegations in it were defamatory, and it was very difficult to deal with that. We were able to quash it. He was able to quash it legally in the courts, but it was still showing up for everywhere from the local newspaper to courthouse news and so forth. So it took time. In the case of filing a lawsuit against someone saying something defamatory, that's fine to do. Increasingly today, it's difficult to track down those people. They could be anywhere, and every country has different rules, different jurisdictions. If I'm in the US, let's say I'm here in Texas and our business is here, and the person or company defaming me is also in Texas, well, I know the laws pretty well, and I know where they are and how to find them. And so I could have that option of filing a lawsuit. What you have to think about, though, with a lawsuit is lawsuits live forever online too. You know, when you file a lawsuit, particularly one that talks about defamatory things or salacious things, it's going to be online because there are sources that publish lawsuits and report on lawsuits. And so that's going to be there. And the bottom line is, even if you end up winning that lawsuit, to some subset of people, just the fact that you're involved in lawsuits, well, they don't care who won and lost. This is a company that's involved in these things. So I would just think carefully about weighing the risks of this continuing defamation, if it's continuing, versus the benefits and risks of taking that action.
Okay, we have another question. Should a brand distance or completely disassociate itself from crises or scandals caused by influencers it collaborates with? A great example of this is James Charles and a beauty brand called Morphe that cut ties with Charles only after several scandals of his.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that when you align with an influencer, you own what that influencer does. So, it's like what we do when we hire people is we take a long time to hire them. We have a long process. We don't just hire someone who does well in an interview. We have them really put them through the paces to make sure they're a fit for us. You need to do that same thing with influencers, specifically because these things can happen. And I would say the moment an influencer is doing actions or doing something that is not aligned with your brand's goals and is not something that you support, I think that stepping out of that relationship is you will be tarred with the same brush if you don't. So I think we've already had many examples where that exact thing has happened, and then even when in some cases a brand who stepped away from an influencer tried to come back a few months later, it was noticed, and then it was worse off than if they had never left the influencer to begin with.
Okay, so I think we have two more questions.
I just realized in my technical difficulties, I think I had a slide on monitoring. So I wanted to point out that Media Toolkit is one of a number of very good tools for monitoring online reputation. Real-time monitoring, which is what you need because you have to act quickly. Brand mentions, executive mentions, competitor mentions, industry spikes, sentiment, sources across social news, websites, forums, comments, and being able to instantly create reports for internal sharing with executives when a big decision has to be made, or small decision, the decisions that have to be made in running your business and managing its reputation. Tools like Media Toolkit, whether you use that or Cision or the other tools that are out there, it's important to have something in place to be able to do this in real time.
Yeah, this ties in nicely, if I could add, with the influencer marketing aspect, because monitoring online reputation also means that if you monitor influencers you collaborate with, you could anticipate said crisis or scandals, because you would be the first ones to know if something like that happened on the internet. So yeah. Okay, the next question is, how do you choose your clients, and do you have preferred industries you work with?
Yes, I'm glad you say how do you choose your clients, because it's important for both parties to understand that it has to be a mutually beneficial relationship. There has to be a connection where both parties feel like it's a fit, or it's just not going to work. We have our clients, our prospects fill out a culture index survey to kind of see where they're coming from and what they value and how they see their job, things like that, to understand our client contact, who they're going to be in advance of even starting a relationship. In terms of industry, we focus on technology and e-commerce. The majority of our work is in those areas of the trust solutions that I described. But in terms of how we pick, obviously they have to be able to, we have programs that are based on quality, long-term benefits rather than quick fixes. So that has to be kind of reflected in their commitment to the program from a budget standpoint and so forth. But basically, most of our clients are mid-size B2B tech, but we talk to anybody because we've worked with some very large companies like Amazon. We work with the Stanford Graduate School of Business, but we also work with some bootstrap startups that we've had great relationships with. So it can be anyone along that spectrum.
Okay, and the final question, someone asked, is it a goal for some people to get canceled? They specifically think of some politically conservative people being banned from social media platforms just to prove that the world is being unjust to them.
Well, yeah, this has certainly become a political football, and for all sides of both sides of the coin, all sides of the equation, these are, what's happened is the people doing the canceling, it gives them social proof and improves their engagement and standing. So there are people out there who hunt for things to turn into cancellations, right? Because you get rewarded for it, and it's entertaining to people in a Schadenfreude kind of way. You never have a cancellation occur where you're not seeing in the comments on Twitter someone posting a GIF of someone eating popcorn. That's just part of the deal. And so because of the attention exposure they get, in some cases it might be on brand for someone, usually not a brand, but an individual, to be canceled. And to say, people on their Twitter accounts will say things like, I got blocked by so-and-so, like that gives them cred with their audience that someone else doesn't like them. Unfortunately, that's kind of where the culture is right now. It's part of the reason why you have to tread so carefully with who you're trying to reach and what you're saying to them when you're managing your reputation today.
Okay, so I hoped Scott answered all of your questions. If you have any more, you can email him. The email was stated in the deck, and we'll make sure to share the recording of the webinar for everyone, both those that couldn't come and those who were with us today. So you could maybe rewatch and remind yourselves of the very useful things that were said today. So thank you, Scott. I enjoyed this webinar.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I appreciate people bearing with me in my technical issues, and just I haven't given a presentation in so long because I've been working on this book. But I'm glad I'm getting a chance to share some of this stuff, and it's been fun, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks everyone for listening in.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you everyone once again, and hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar. Bye, guys.